Welcome back to Lesson 16 of the Napoleon Hill 17 Universal Principles of Success. We will be discussing and uncovering in great depth Napoleon Hill's Lesson 16 entitled Budgeting Time and Money. On this program, we have a power trio who really know and understand firsthand the power that comes with budgeting time and money as outlined by Napoleon Hill. So before we enter this exciting session together on the behalf of the Napoleon Hill Foundation, it's our great pleasure and honor of introducing our dynamic panel of guests. And they are Sharon Lechter, Jim Stovall, and Larry Winget. One of the common denominators that tie all of these outstanding individuals together is the impact that Napoleon Hill has had on all of their lives. So starting with Sharon Lechter, Sharon has been inspired by reading Think and Grow Rich from the age of 19. After earning her credentials as a CPA, she helped start the talking book industry and then turned her passion to financial literacy. As co-author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad and 14 other Rich Dad books, she led the Rich Dad Company to global powerhouse over 10 years. In 2008, the Napoleon Hill Foundation asked Sharon to help re-energize the Napoleon Hill brand, and her two next best-selling books, 3 Feet from Gold and Outwitting the Devil, were written in cooperation with the foundation. Outwitting the Devil was originally written by Hill to be the sequel to Think and Grow Rich, but was hidden for over 75 years until Sharon helped bring it out in 2011. In addition, her company, Pay Your Family First, creates award-winning and innovative financial educational tools. Her newest and just released book, Save Wisely, Spend Happily, was written with the contributions from 125 CPAs from the American Institute of CPAs. Her passion is teaching people to become masters of their money instead of slaves to it. And joining Sharon on the program is Jim Stovall. And Jim was introduced to the teachings of Napoleon Hill through his mentor, who gave him a copy of Think and Grow Rich at a time in Jim's life when he was facing total blindness, poverty, and depression. Since that time, Jim has become a national champion Olympic weightlifter, the founder and president of the Emmy Award-winning Narrative Television Network, and best-selling author of 21 books, 5 of which have been made into major motion pictures. He is a highly sought-after arena speaker and syndicated columnist, and to this day, he credits Napoleon Hill's philosophy as a foundation of his success. And thirdly, and certainly not last, is Larry Winget. And Larry is a 5 times New York Times, Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and his books have been translated into over 20 languages. He's a professional speaker and mentor of the International Speaker Hall of Fame. He's hosted his own TV series and PBS special, appeared in national commercials, and is a regular contributor on many news shows on the topics of money, personal success, and business. Over 25 years ago, when Larry first got into personal development, Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich had an enormous impact on the direction his life was to go. He considers Napoleon Hill's principles of success to be as relevant today as when they were first written. So with that said, welcome everybody to the lesson of budgeting time and money. Great to be with you.
Hey, thanks for having us.
Oh, it's great. Did we budget our time okay with that introduction?
I'm not sure. Don't put us on the spot like that quickly, see?
Well, that's great. Well, let's just get right into the program. We've heard the old adage that time is money. What are the similarities between time and money?
Well, both money and time are precious resources, but money, you can actually lose money and recover it, but time, when you spend time, it's gone forever. So I think the whole issue behind budgeting time and money is to understand that, as my dear friend Rita Davenport says, money is right up there next to oxygen. We need it to live, but it's how we spend our time is how we can define our success, because if you dedicate yourself to moving forward and creating goals and achieving them, the money will come.
And I think they both are related because it has to do with your priorities. I believe your time, your energy, and your money all go to things that are most important to you. So if you want to track what's important to you, look at your time and look at your money, and that will tell you. I can go into your house and look at your house and then look at your checking account and look at your credit card statement, and I'll know exactly what's important to you based on how you spend your money. I can track your time and follow you around for a day and see how you actually spend your time, and I'll also know what's important to you. So those two things, more in my opinion than any other two things on the planet, will define your priorities and prove what your priorities are more than any other things.
And building on what Larry said, I think time and money are similar to the extent that we exchange either of them for things that we want. But unless you capture Napoleon Hill's concept of definiteness of purpose, unless you know what it is you want, you don't know whether you're spending your time or your money wisely. And when we start out in this life, a lot of us end up spending our time for someone else's money. And then as we grow and become more efficient and build wealth and success, hopefully we're spending our money to buy other people's time to free up that precious commodity of time that Sharon mentioned, because you can get more money. You can lose it all and build it up 2 or 3 times. But time, we've only got so much and we don't get any more.
Fabulous. And that was Jim, just for our listeners, and Larry just preceding Jim, just for voice recognition.
Oh, they'll be able to tell us apart here pretty quick, I'll guarantee. What I think is important, what you said about the exchanging time for money and money for time and so forth, is I've discovered over the years that I get more selfish with my time and much less selfish with my money.
Yeah, I noticed that exact thing in my giving, because it gets so easy to think of your giving and charity and just scribble off a check to somebody. But when I really think about things I care about, I really try to combine my time and money and get more on purpose, because the money, it's cheap. You can throw it away and get more, but that time is what I find scarce and really valuable.
And we learn that more and more as we age, when you realize that you do need to be a little jealous of your time and know that every moment you spend, whether it be with your family or at work, people start feeling guilty about not spending enough time here or there. And it all comes back to choices. In Napoleon Hill, each of us has the choice each and every day of how we're going to spend our time, how we're going to spend our money. And it's those choices that each and every one of us, Jim, Larry, and I, all approach from different ways about teaching people that the choices they make, they need to be accountable for. And that if ever there was a principle by Napoleon Hill, it was that definiteness of purpose and the choice that you make each and every day, whether you're going to move forward towards that definite purpose or not. And moving forward, you can do that by using your money or your time. But we say the time is such a precious commodity.
And you know what's happened over the years with most, well, I hate to use the term because I don't hold all of them in the highest regard, with the motivational speakers and the whole personal development movement, is how we moved away from that definiteness of purpose, and we started telling people, and we've all heard this, you can have it all. And we have this whole generation of people who have grown up thinking, you can have it all. And you see, that's a lie. You can't have it all. You have to choose. Once you start forcing people in the idea of choosing and setting priorities, then they'll look at their time and their money much, much differently.
Have you attached a dollar amount to your time, and is that a good approach to being sensitive to the value of time?
I think I could answer that. I learned that lesson from Larry Wingate. I was trying to decide whether I wanted to be a professional speaker and make that an actual part of our business enterprise, the various things we do, because it just started growing organically, and I realized this is taking over, and if we're going to do this, we need to really do it on purpose. And I wasn't sure it was worth it in light of the other things we do and the other way we serve people. After a brief meeting with Larry Wingate, he clued me in, and if you will, if you can do it with a blind guy, he opened my eyes to the fact that this is a bigger picture than I thought it was. And all of a sudden, it became worth it. And the time didn't change, but the amount of money changed the equation, and all of a sudden it made it worthwhile. It's like telling people, would you come mow my lawn for $20? Probably not. For $20,000, I can get a line around the block. So that time-money ratio changes, the equation changes.
Excellent. How does one, and here's the key question, how does one go about budgeting both their time and money?
I mean, the first thing, you can't budget it if you don't know how much of it you have. And so you really have to analyze where you are. My father taught me math is useless unless you know where you are and where you want to go. So the first thing is you have to figure out where you are. Then you have to set that definite goal. And then you can budget your time and your resources to get to the goal. But people talk about budget and their eyes glaze over because they think of it as a 4-letter word. It's like, no, let's talk about a plan as opposed to a budget. And the first step in the plan is to figure out where you are, what you have to work with today, and where you want to go. And that's when you create the plan, which many people call budgeting. But the plan is, how am I going to spend my day today and my resources today to get one step closer, or hopefully 2 steps closer to that definite goal.
Sharon, and what you said is much where I was going to start too, and I love how you pointed out the word budget. Budget scares people, and they're intimidated by it, and just figure out where you are. The most popular question I get, and I do this a lot, is always, just give us 3 simple steps, Larry, on what it takes to be successful, and that's really where it starts. Number 1, you have to figure out where you are. So just get out a sheet of paper, and then people always say, is there an app for that? No, there's not an app for that. Get out a sheet of paper. And take a sheet of paper and write down exactly where you are in every area of your life. Then take a second sheet of paper and write out where you want to be in every area of your life. So now you have 2 sheets of paper, one with where you are and the second one with where you want to be. That is budgeting, but people don't have to call it budgeting, so they're intimidated by it. And then the third most important sheet of paper is figure out what you're going to give up to get from where you are to where you want to be. And that's where it all falls apart, because we have been told you can have it all, and now suddenly we're saying you have to give something up. You have to make choices. You have to figure out what's most important, say yes to what's more important by saying no to what isn't as important. You see, but we've been told you can get rich. No, you can't get rich. You got to give up what's making you poor. You don't get skinny. You give up what's making you fat. You don't get successful. You give up what's making you unsuccessful. So those choices between where you are and where you want to be are the ones that have to be made.
And the term budget becomes much less scary when we realize we're not giving up control. We're, for the first time in our life, taking control. People that don't have a budget have no control of their money. Their money's controlling them. But when you set a budget, now all of a sudden you're getting out that roadmap and you're getting some criteria in your life and you're deciding what does matter to me. And as Larry said so well, you cannot have it all. You simply can't. I mean, you don't get something for nothing. You spent all your time and money last year. So don't think you're going to have more time or more money unless you invest one or the other in something you want more than you have now. When you go to the mall, they have all those maps all over the place, and they're absolutely identical, one end of the mall or the other. And the only critical point to that is this little tiny thing that says you are here. And until you know you are here, the whole thing is absolutely useless. So as Sharon pointed out, you got to get that budget. You got to know where you are. And for most people listening to this, because most Americans and most people around the world, that's a negative number. When you really get that net worth and you really decide what it is and really look at your assets versus your liability, for most people, you've got to dig out of the hole and get back to ground zero and then start building from there. But that minute you figure out where you are, you're ahead of 90% of the people.
And Jim, their time is a negative number too, not just their money.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They're robbing from tomorrow and spending it today, just like they're doing on their credit card. They're putting things off that really matter because they're doing things now that don't matter. People spend their time and money for the dumbest reasons. When you ask people, why do you give or spend the money the way you did, somebody sold it to me or they asked me for the money. That's a dumb reason. That is not definiteness of purpose. You can't answer the phone and have people sell you stuff that you buy and assume that they are going to invest your money the way you should. The same thing with your time. If you sit around your office and let people come in and interrupt you because of their crisis brought on by their mismanagement, all of a sudden they will take all of your time. You need to do nothing more than turn on the television and look at all the ads. People are clamoring for your time and your money, and you don't make quality decisions by letting them take it from you. You make quality decisions by determining that definiteness of purpose, and then you invest each of those in your future based on where you are and where you want to be, like Larry said.
And I think we talk about budgeting time and money and knowing where you are, but the biggest obstacle for most people is just plain fear. They're fearful. Certainly the last few years have made that fear even greater. Fear can either paralyze you or motivate you. And for most people, it creates instant paralysis. And so even the thought of figuring out where they are, the fear won't let them take that first step. And when they make the choice to make that first step, they feel that power of choice, that power of taking control, as both Larry and Jim mentioned. And once you take that first step, the second step is a little easier. But it's getting over that fear factor and understanding that fear is controlling you. And when you realize that you are a slave to that fear, then you can say, okay, I'm not going to let that happen anymore. I'm going to make a different choice. I'm going to sit down and get those 3 pieces of paper that Larry just talked about, and I'm just going to start number 1 with, where am I today? And realize that the fear is what prevents you from starting. And if you can't get over that fear, that's the first step in understanding I am going to make this choice for myself and for my family. And once they make that choice, then they can start moving in the right direction.
And you know, Sharon, you're dealing with a lot better, higher quality person evidently than I have in the past, because I've dealt with a lot of people who were fearless. And they were not afraid enough of the downside of wasting your time or wasting your money, because they had built into them, someone's going to bail me out at the end of this. And we've reached that place in our society of entitlements where they just are confident that I can be as stupid as I want to be in every area of my life, and someone's always going to be there to take care of me. And we're past that point of personal responsibility where you have to understand it's up to us to take care of ourselves. And so the people who are afraid when they turn on the television and say, the economy's in trouble here, and they're so afraid about the economy, they don't understand that their economy is really kind of up to them, and that they get to step in and actually have some impact on the way their life looks based on how much money they have, how much money they earn, based on how busy they are willing to be and how hard they're willing to work. But we have people who are in the same place that you're talking about where they are afraid, and then we have this group of people who are absolutely without fear that they can do anything in the world stupid and someone's always going to be there for them.
And fear controls so many of our decisions, and all real estate's local and all finance is personal to somebody, and it doesn't really matter what the news says. It doesn't matter what's going on Wall Street or at the White House. It matters what's going on in my street, in my house, and I control that. But people are afraid that if I do something, if I set a goal, if I make a plan, if I make a decision, I could make a mistake. Well, the one thing I can assure you is if you don't make any decision, it's definitely a mistake. And I remember there was a time in my life I thought I was going to be a professional football player, and I found out there's no blind guys in the NFL, so I had to go another direction. But I remember in a spring practice, I'm standing there on the field, and I'm the new guy in the huddle, and it's really complicated. I wasn't sure which guy I was supposed to block, so at the appointed time, I just stood there. I did nothing, and the coach came over and said, "What was that?" And I said, "Well, I didn't know who to block." He said, "Let me give you a hint. We have no plays that don't involve you doing something. So if you're not sure what to do something, because you might get the right thing, but at least you'll be out of the way." And that's the same thing when we look at our time and money. I mean, a bad plan is better than no plan, because it's the next step to a better plan and a great plan. And just because your first budget or your first goal or your first plan aren't perfect, it doesn't mean it's not still the step that you need to take next. Do something.
I tell people, Jim, that when they're so concerned about doing the wrong thing, I said, just go ahead and do it. And they said, well, what if it was the wrong thing? I said, well, you'll know quicker, won't you?
Absolutely.
And they'll know not to do that again, so they can try something else. When it comes to budgeting time and money, talking about money, it's kind of a simple process. Spend less than you earn. You know, if people could get that into their brain, spend less than you earn and save the rest and invest the rest. The problem is that, as Larry so aptly points out, we have gotten into a world of entitlements, and there is that mentality that the world owes me a living. And at the end of the day, you and I may not be able to control the international global economy or the national economy, but we can control our own wallets. And that's what people, they don't want to. They put their head in the sand, and they just expect that the world's going to take care of them. Larry, you call them fearless, but I think they're clueless. They're absolutely clueless, because many of them were raised in a time of great affluence, easy credit, easy money, and the world changed, and they're clueless, and they do expect that they're going to always be taken care of. And there's no better book on earth than The Ultimate Gift. I love that. I give it to every parent. I think it's so important for parents to understand that the kids have to learn that personal responsibility. Everybody gets a trophy as part of the problem. We need to let our kids learn how to make a mistake, fail, and recover on their own.
Yeah, ironically, The Ultimate Gift, the book and the movie, have become kind of iconic in the financial planning realm, and I didn't write it as a financial planning. It had nothing to do with it. I mean, managing our money is no different than managing our time, managing our weight, managing our alcohol, managing our relationships. Those things take care of themselves. It's managing me is what I have the problem with. If I can manage me, my money and time take care of themselves. And the thing that the Ultimate Gift has taught people is to help them connect that relationship between time and money with kids. If you give them unlimited resources and no responsibility, they attach no value to the money. Because money's only valuable, it only represents what we had to do to get it. There's a whole lot of people out there that, as Larry said, they're waiting on the government, they're waiting on someone to take care of them, and all of a sudden you've got a whole lot of people that are riding in the wagon and fewer people pulling the wagon. Then the challenge you get is that people have no value. They don't value that money. And if you think you're going to be one of those people, just wait for the government or somebody else to come take care of you. Look at how those people are living today. Yeah, you can get something for nothing. You'll get a little something, but it's certainly not the way anybody would want to live. It's nothing worth aspiring to.
It means they don't have big enough goals. They don't have strong enough priorities. They haven't sat down and actually figured out. I tell people that you have to sit down and write a plan, and I know you all tell people the very same thing. I had a guy write me the other day and said, Larry, I just don't think that's going to work for me. I said, well, I don't care what you think. It does work. People can prove to you that having a written down plan with established priorities and goals does work, because I've never met anybody who sat down and wrote out a plan to be fat, stupid, lazy, broke, and in bad relationships. Those are the things that happen to you when you don't have a plan. So figure out what you want your life to look like and create a plan that makes that happen. You know, that's why the resolutions don't work. That's why actually goal setting for most people don't work, because they haven't sat down and attached actions to their plans. You got to go to work at some point, and I know the three of us, we work.
Very interesting insights here. And Napoleon Hill starts off the process with assessing your position, as you've all pointed out, and doing a personal inventory, which would, I think, represent sheet number 1 that you talked about, Larry. What are some of the key questions that one ought to ask themselves when working that inventory?
Well, I like to do it backwards with time and money, and I'm much more concerned about the time. And I think if people would really sit down and start looking at what are their priorities, what's important in my life, if you'll think it's 50 years in the future or 80 years in the future and they're writing your obituary, what do you want to stand for? What matters to you when you're leaving it all behind? And I don't care how much money you make, you leave it all here, and your time is all gone. What do you want to have said about you? I did this. This mattered to me. I made this difference. And it doesn't matter what it is. There's no right or wrong answer. But if you don't have that plan, you don't have a chance. It's like Larry said, and Sharon probably pointed out better than anyone has in our generation through the Rich Dad, Poor Dad. It's just a matter of decision. I mean, Rich Dad was no different than Poor Dad. He was the same guy. He just made some different choices. But if you're the Rich Dad thinking, you're in the minority. Most people are going to think you're weird. If you have the written goals, if you have the budget, you're going to be strange. And we all seem to want to gravitate toward being like everyone else. And you've got to realize, if you don't feel weird in your time and money and the way you budget and spend it, you're average. And average is broke and poor and distressed and discouraged in our world today.
Mm-hmm. So, Jim, your process, if I'm not mistaken, is sort of a mind mapping type of where
I think decide where you want to be. And too many people, they never divorce themselves from their current reality long enough to really get into the power of that. They're looking at a very limited menu. Do you want A, B, or C? Because that's all they've known with the people around them. But you need to get out there and really think, what is possible? What would I do if time and money were no object? If anything was possible, anything in the world was possible, what would I be doing? And what am I willing to give up to do that? And remember, the more outrageous it is, it's still possible. It's just the more you're going to have to give up to get it. Fewer and fewer people get to the very summit of the mountain. If you want to be up there, there's not a lot of room, but there's room for you if that's where you want to be. But it costs a lot of time and money to get there. Everything costs. Everything's a trade-off. But if you don't make that decision, if you don't have that budget and you don't make that plan, you never get anywhere. You get the leftovers.
My approach is just a little different in that I don't think you can motivate somebody from where they are to where you want them to be or where they even want to be. I just don't believe that. I think I can work with people to show them how gorgeous the mountaintop is, and they'll never get there. So that's why I take it from the other end. That's why I call myself an irritational speaker instead of a motivational speaker. In fact, it's trademarked. I'm the world's only irritational speaker. I don't believe I can motivate you from where you are to where you want to be, but I'll guarantee you I can make you so irritated with where you are that you will do anything to get to where you want to be.
Yeah, I think we're saying the same thing. And
we are, that I think people need a little more fear in there of where they are, because I've never worked with anybody. I didn't on my television show, never individually, worked with one person who could actually sit down and tell me exactly where they are, especially when it came down to time and money. Most people don't even know how much money they earn, and that's true. They certainly don't know who they owe or how much they owe. So they've never really taken an assessment. I really think the power of assessment right at the beginning is the one thing that can get you off your butt, moving in the right direction. So maybe for the very first time you look at your life and you look at your money and you look at your time and you look at the way you're spending your time and your money with your family, and you say, I should be terrified. I've got to do something about this. And that can be a great motivator to go to a better place.
When I talk to people, I actually kind of combine what the two of you are saying, because obviously you need to know where you are. That's the first thing. When you realize that you are not where you thought you were, you're in a little worse position, that in itself can create motivation. And you set that long-term goal that is what you want your life to mean when you're gone. Who did you add value to? What was your legacy? That's fabulous to have, but that is kind of unreachable, untouchable to someone who's had a lifetime of bad habits. So I combine the two, and then I add a third element, and I go, let's have little wins. Let's have a little goal and set something that is achievable, something that you can do in the next 2 weeks. Little goal. Let's set it. Let's write it down, and let's achieve it, and then celebrate, because that gives you that motivation to make the next little win. So I call mine little wins, and always in the same direction for the big goal. And that when you start accomplishing those little goals, it gives you that self-confidence and that self-esteem to keep going. But the first step has got to be where you are, and it does. That when you realize that you're worse off than you thought you were, it can turn into motivation to take that first step.
You know, what we need to do is get a big group of people together, and I'll come in at the front and scare people. And then, Jim, you come in and say, I know Larry has scared you, but it could be like this. And then, Sharon, you step in and said, let me show you how to get from what Larry did to you to where Jim wants you to be.
Yeah, there's no one more practical than Sharon or irritational than Larry.
Or motivational than you, see? So there we go.
But the point is, if you keep hanging around a lot of people that are broke and scared, you start feeling normal. You start feeling okay. But only when you get your mind thinking about what is possible, only then does the status quo become unbearable. This is pathetic. But it only becomes pathetic in relation to where you want to be. You hang around a lot of losers. Being a loser will start to get pretty comfortable. But only when someone like Larry comes in and holds a mirror up to him and irritates him, or someone else comes in and says, did you know what was possible if you just get up off your blessed assurance and change the channel in your life? What is really possible out there?
You know, which I think is interesting, too, is that you bring in three people with one common message, that you can be in control of your life and your time and your money, and look at the three very different styles, and yet everybody's going to resonate with something different. And that's what I think is interesting for people, is that they have to get out and actually search for education, search for knowledge, search for paths that resonate with them. What I'm saying won't speak to a lot of people. And Jim, I have an audience that they don't care about the mountaintop. They're trying to make their house payment. And Sharon's going to reach people that Jim, you and I will never reach. The point is, I think that you have to go out and search and look at a lot of people's stuff to find what really resonates with you and where you are.
You're totally right, and that's why I'm glad we're here today. That's what makes Napoleon Hill so amazing, because he was the first in the field, and I've never met a successful person. I've never met a top achiever. You don't have to ask, have you read Think and Grow Rich? You ask, when did you first read Think and Grow Rich? Because it is that universal. So that's what's amazing about Hill, is that it became the basis, in a certain way, of everybody's work. But then we put it in a way that different people can attach it. I'm in the message business, and people say, well, do you speak or make movies or do television or write columns? It's all the same to me. It's just a different way to deliver the same message. And so whether you listen to Sharon or Larry or any of our other colleagues, basically at some level we get down to the same thing, and that's why I think Hill is part of the glue that holds everybody together.
You know, I think what Larry said about mindset is so important, because people come to these seminars and they want the magic pill. They want that magic pill that's going to let them lose weight, or they want that magic formula that's going to let them get rich overnight. And that's the mentality, and what we've created is this mentality and a series of habits And so it's making it increasingly more difficult to get people to understand, yeah, we can upset them in a seminar, but we have to give them the steps that they can take to feel more in control of their lives, because they're going to go home to that same environment. Just as Jim said, it's so important that we control the environment that we are in. And if you go back to that comfort environment of quote-unquote drifters, people who have no goals, and what happens is they start seeing you change and they pull you back because they're fearful. They see you making positive choices, but they're not ready. And so it's so important to analyze, and that's where you measure how you spend your time. Look at who you hang out with the most. Are they more successful than you are? If they are, great, because that's going to help motivate you. Or are they the same level you are, or even less successful? And so that's your common denominator. If you want to change where you're headed, change who you're hanging out with, and that comes back to how you're budgeting your time. In Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill talks about the way to get out of that fearfulness, to be able to start employing the principles of Think and Grow Rich, is to measure your environment. Look at the environment. How are you spending your time, and how are you spending your money? The environment that you're in is so, so very important. Have you created a mastermind? Have you created a group of advisors that want to help you make the successful transition? Are you plugging into a Larry that Larry can tell you, that basically give you the brutal honesty of what you need to do and get yourself moving in the right direction?
If I could get Larry to speak to something, I've always wanted to know. Larry, how do you deal with the fact that among a lot of people out there, I can watch late night cable and I can get rich by next month and be thin by next Tuesday, and I get something for nothing and it's easy. And here comes Larry, says, no, there's nothing free and you got to trade for something. How do you deal with the people you work with in that mindset? When someone's telling you it's cheap, it's easy, it's free, it's not your fault, you can get something for nothing, and then you come along in your beloved irritational self and tell people that's just not true. How do you deal with that?
Well, I don't much worry about how they feel about my message, and I do bother a lot of people with my absolutely black and white, life is your own fault message. Everything that's going on in your life, you created it at some level. So let's go back to understanding that every action has a consequence, and that consequence is your fault. Now, what I also remind people is that if you're rich, that's your fault, and if you're successful, that's your fault. That's the consequence of good behavior, and the opposite is the consequence of bad behavior. First, I try to show people that it was their actions that created the results that they're living right now. And if they don't like the results, they have to change their actions. And I don't try to make myself easy to agree with. I make myself impossible to disagree with. How can anybody disagree that if your actions that were correct actions brought about success, your actions that were bad actions brought about failure? And then they go, okay, now I see that. And so once you kind of point that out to them, I let people feel bad. I want people to hurt. I want people to finally get to the point that they have that Jimmy Swaggart moment where they look to the heavens and tears run down their face until their mascara runs and they're crying and say, oh, Lord, I've been an idiot. Because I think until you get to that point where you really tie some emotion to your stupidity and you realize I made this mess and I can fix this mess, I don't believe you're ever going to get better. So I want it to become personal. I want it to become emotional. I want it to feel like a real tragedy in their life so they finally, for one time, say, I did this. I'm sorry. I made the mistake. Now I'm ready. And I don't think that you can take somebody from an intellectual level to a better place, but I know if I can get them to that gut level where they accept responsibility, then they're willing to do something about it.
That is powerful, and then if you combine that with Sharon's thing of a little win, if I can realize that all this garbage in my life is my fault and I did it to myself, but if I can find something and just get a little win, but this new thing I have, I did that one thing, and that can be the beginning of everything.
Yeah.
Well, Napoleon Hill talks about the importance of experiential learning, and what Larry's talking about is exactly that. People read a book, and it goes from the book to the eyes to the brain, and so they're not going to necessarily be engaged. But if you can get them involved at an emotional level, when you talk about a story or something that they can relate to, when you get them in a seminar and you can get them involved emotionally, that's when they experience your message. And by experiencing the message, you've got them engaged not only in their mind, but in their heart. And that's when they're going to be able to take action, is when exactly what Larry just said, is you're getting them at the emotional level. And that emotional level is where they're going to actually recognize they need to change first and then look on how to change.
Well, we buy everything emotionally. You buy a car emotionally, that car over the next car. So if you want them to buy into a new way of thinking, you first have to get them at that emotional level.
We've been spending a lot of time on mindset, which is a starting point. A lot of people will be saying, okay, now how do I begin? How much of my financial income should I be allocating to my living expenses, to savings, to investment, and so forth? I know that you've all touched on that in your work, but that is a common question, isn't it, that people ask?
Well, first go back to that first page and figure out where you are. Figure out what you're now spending on your living expenses and on your insurance and on your food and so forth,
right.
And then figure out how much you should be spending, and then figure out what you're going to give up in each one of those areas to get your spending in alignment with what it really should be. You know, when the average American right now spends $2,400 per year eating out, that's probably a little out of whack for what most people's income is right now. So you might want to look at that as an expense. You need to get more in alignment with what it should be and what you can afford.
So what should that be?
Before you start figuring out how should I spend the money for things going forward, most Americans and most people around the world have got to pay for the stuff they already got that they haven't paid for yet. People come to me all the time and say, how do I invest my money? Most of them don't have any money. And before you can start building your wealth, the first thing you got to do is get out of the hole. And you can cover the vast majority of people because they have a negative net worth. First thing you got to do is get out of debt. You've got to throw everything you can at that debt and get out of debt. Then I really believe if you want peace of mind and you want to move forward and not let every little bump in the road be a tragedy, you need an emergency fund. You need a rainy day fund, whatever you want to call it. It was several months worth of income. Most people say 3 to 6 months, somewhere in there, and then you start building your wealth. But until you've gotten out of the hole and you've created a little bit of a cushion so that every bump in the road isn't a total crisis and calamity in your life, you really don't start building any wealth.
You know, if you want a really practical place to start, everybody should look at their high-interest credit card debt. Easy. Mm-hmm. Start right there. High-interest credit card debt, that's stupid money that you've spent on things that you probably still don't have or have already thrown away or outgrown or used up, and that money is gone. Fix that first. Get your high-interest credit card debt gone, and then you can start looking at other areas. But that's a great place to start.
Would you suggest that people, though they're throwing everything they can at that debt, which is the position that most Americans are at right now, should also be saving simultaneously, or should they forfeit the savings part for the sake of bringing down that debt?
I think they've got to get that absolute crisis, that wolf away from the door. Everything that goes wrong can't create a total crisis in your life. And there is going to be a time in your life where you're no longer able to trade your time for someone else's money. And people are ignoring retirement out there. And we no longer live in a world that our grandparents did, where there's a pension coming and you get this cost of living increase and they're going to take care of you for the rest of your life. And if you're feeling comfortable in Social Security, I'm going to send Larry to your house to irritate you a little more. At best, that was only intended to be a supplement, and I get so distressed and frustrated when I see how many people work somewhere where their employer will match their 401k, and they don't even take the cheap free dollars. They don't even do that for themselves. So those, like Larry said, you start with the high-interest credit cards, you get rid of those, you get out of debt, you build yourself a little bit of cushion, you take the free cheap money into 401k, and then from there you begin building your real wealth.
But you also have to look at where you're spending your money, and when you can save a few dollars in one area, that's what you use to pay off that high interest. So you really do need to look at where you're spending your money, look at how it compares. It's easy. Just Google national averages, and it quickly will identify where you're way out of whack and start saying, okay, what changes can I make today to free up some of that money that I can use to pay off that high-interest credit card? What change can I make today to save some money that is used if you get a raise at work? Don't spend it. Don't expand your lifestyle. Use that raise to pay off that debt. So there's some practical things that you can do to find that money and then allocate it to those high-interest credit cards. It's a balancing act, reducing your spending so that you can use those dollars to get out of debt.
So it really all starts with a lifestyle change. And that's, again, going to be the problem, that the last thing in the world people want to do is alter their lifestyle, even if they say they want to achieve more and have more and be more and do more. You mean I've got to sacrifice my lifestyle? I can't watch television anymore 6 hours a day? What do you mean I've got to give up my third HBO channel? I'm not willing to sacrifice in order to get what I want. That's what they have to change their mindset. And so while you like practical ideas, and believe me, I'm the king of practicality when it comes to just do this, don't argue with me, if they don't get their mind right, it can't last for them.
Fabulous. And what about the issue of tithing and giving to charity? Napoleon Hill writes about that, and for many people who are religious, they're part of a church and community, where does that fit in the context of someone who's in debt?
That's where you talk about budgeting your time. When people say to me, I really don't have any money to give to charity, I said, but you have time. And what happens is when they start giving their time to charity and start giving that valuable resources of time, they end up meeting other donors. They find ways to expand their mastermind by creating a whole new network of people who want to give back. And through that, they might find a great association that's going to help them in their next business venture. Tithing, certainly, we want them to give a percentage of all of their income to charity. But if they're in such a deep hole, they just can't find it. Say, well, start giving your time, because that time is very valuable as well. They get that habit of giving. That habit of giving, again, it goes back to the mindset Larry's talking about. Once they start giving time and money, they're going to start receiving that gratefulness, and that's going to give them motivation to give more. And that's going to give them a higher mindset of being mindful of their own expenses.
And you know, what I have to say about tithing is I don't like the word tithing. I think for too many people it carries just too much baggage. And it does sound too religious for people. And so I just stay away from the word tithing. I just think that you have to give at least 10% of your money. And for those who can't, I go back to the Sharon method in there. Could you give $1? Could you start somewhere of giving some amount of money, habit of giving some amount of money, in addition to your time, but give some amount of money somewhere so you can start the habit of beginning to give. And don't think of it as tithing with all the religious connotation. Just think of it as that's your obligation to give a portion of what you make. That's why you're here, to give back. Give back starting there with some amount of money.
People who tell me that they are going to become a giver once they're wealthy or successful are absolutely kidding themselves. If you're not giving a portion of what you have now, you never will, because you've bought into what I call the disease of more. And as long as you want more and you don't have a definite purpose, if all you want is more, you will die trying to get more. And I am a firm believer the most fun you will ever have with money is giving it away. And the first time I heard someone say that concept, I thought, what an abs. I got there and started doing it until I got there and started doing it myself. And it has been an amazing joy in my life. And I spend more time now trying to figure out how to give my money away through my foundation than I do really earning more money. I remember when Bill Gates said it's harder to give it away responsibly than it was to earn it. I didn't believe that until I actually experienced it. It's very counterintuitive, and you can't outgive the universe. You can't outgive the system. It's just an amazing response. But a lot of people are waiting for a huge harvest, and they've never really planted any seeds in his life, like into anyone else's life. Like Sharon said, if you don't have any money, if you start giving your time and seeing some people that are really less fortunate, really in need, and you start looking at, like Larry said, you're eating out or your cable TV, do I really want that third HBO channel? Larry talked about more than I want to help this kid go to school, or more than this little girl needs shoes, or whatever the case may be. And when you look at some of the work we do, everything becomes a function of, for 25 cents, I can buy somebody a meal in Haiti, and it really starts to affect how do I want to really spend my money. And you start giving, earning, saving, and investing all on purpose.
What you said, Jim, about people who wait is that when you've got $1, a dime doesn't seem like too much. And if you wait till you get rich, I love what Jim Rohn used to say. He said, wait till you get to have $1 million. That $100,000 check gets real hard to write. So you create the habits when you have a little, so you'll have those habits when you have a lot. But you've got to start with where you are right now.
Excellent.
And you realize that small sacrifice on your part generates huge results to someone else's life. Then it doesn't feel like such a sacrifice.
People tell me all the time, because we are all in agreement on this for sure. They said, well, how does that work, that when you do give, how it works, I get. I don't know how it works. I just know that it works. And because it is a rule, it is a principle that works all the time, and every person I know who's wealthy really does practice that. Don't question how it works. Just believe that it does and start doing it.
Larry is absolutely right. If I have to start understanding every principle that I profit from, I'm going to be broke my whole life. Just look at what the winners do, emulate that, and you win. Quit trying to figure everything out. People don't understand how they're losing right now. They don't understand why that is, and it's just a universal principle. It's a universal principle. It works. It's like electricity and gravity and all those other things I don't understand. I just implement them into my life, and it's a blessing.
Growing up, my father used to ask me each night, have you added value to someone else's life today? And when you start thinking, what are you doing to support other people, to help others get to their goals? And all of a sudden, the world gives back to you. So the issue is, if it's all about you, and you're going to be stingy with your money and stingy with your time, you'll get back. You'll get back. It's important to understand. And so it's really important to understand that the more you give, the more you receive, is in both a positive way and negative way. And so why not start very young, giving in a positive way? Give a little time, give a little money, see the benefit. Let your kids see the benefit of giving. And they start appreciating and are more grateful for what you have and for what they have.
Great insight on that whole subject of giving. Now let's move and touch in the arena of those that aren't in debt, that have a surplus of income, their money in terms of investments and savings and all of.
Well, you're talking to such the numbers are so
we
low
can't
on
leave them out because everyone aspires to be at that place. So when they are there, what formula could you suggest?
Well, I think the formula is different for everyone. I mean, the issue is, again, what are your personal goals, what age you are, do you have children, what are your responsibilities? All of those things have to come together, and that's why it's so important, as Napoleon Hill talks. About, is to seek competent advice. Now, you don't necessarily want to get advice from somebody who's going to benefit from selling you something. But you want to get competent advice to make sure that you take into consideration, again, where you are, where you want to be, and what your responsibilities are today, because that's a very big element. If you're single with no kids, you don't ever want to get married, you're going to have a very different plan. If you're 20 years old versus 60 years old, your plan, response to that question would actually be bad advice from us. So I think it's very important to follow the prescription given by Napoleon Hill, is to get the right people on your team, get that mastermind to help you plan out accordingly. But certainly make sure they take advantage of all free money. As both Jim and Larry have a matching, if you're employed and you have a matching 401k, take advantage of it. It's crazy not to. Take every advantage that you start setting money aside, and keep in mind that emergency fund, an investment fund, your retirement, and the charity. We talk about 3 buckets. I talk about 4, because that retirement is an investment, but you need to also focus on that retirement in the future.
And I do like the idea that people need to understand that it must be individual. That's the problem I have with watching a lot of the investment television shows. Or in part, if there was ever going to be, for the most part, if there was ever going to be an area that there's a yeah but, it would be investment, because everybody's yeah but really is individualized. I have 2 buddies who are all exactly the same age within weeks. Me, I have grandkids. One of them has never had children, no brothers and sisters, no grandchildren, nothing. It's just he and his wife. And the other one, here he is 60 years old with a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old. We are all the same age, so to come to us with 3 very, very different stories and say, here's universal, singular investment advice for you, doesn't make sense. We're the same age in our life, even though we're the same age and make about the same money.
And never take advice from anybody that doesn't have what you want. Fat diet doctors and broke advisors, finance are scary people, and you've got to go out and seek that competent advice that Sharon was talking about. The people that call you at home while you're trying to eat your dinner to sell you investment products, they are not competent advisors. They are salespeople. It doesn't make them evil or bad people, but don't take advice from anybody that doesn't have what you want. And most of the people out there that are trying to tell you how to invest, to pay attention, they don't have enough dollars to pay attention, much less do anything else in life. And when it's all said and done, there's a lot said and very little done, and you've got to get in front of those people that have really been there and know what it is. We all say, well, how much do we need to retire? It's like Larry said, and Sharon, it's so individual. Retirement's an amount of money. It's not an age. The concept of retiring and doing nothing is bogus. But the concept of leaving a job to go do other things you want to do because now you're financially independent, that is totally valid and totally practical, and it's a different number for everybody. Anybody that's giving one size fits all, say, what's the prescription? Like calling a doctor and say, what's the prescription we're giving out today? There's a lot of factors that go into that.
And you wouldn't go to a doctor who is fat, smokes 2 packs a day, and eats every meal at a fast food restaurant. Some do, but they shouldn't. You wouldn't take health advice from a person like that. You shouldn't take financial advice from a person who, on the other side, is a smoking doctor, in much the same way as the fat smoking doctor. There are too many people telling you how to get rich, and the only way they ever got their money was telling you how to get rich, telling other people how to get rich. Be very, very careful when it comes to money. Ask the tough questions of your financial advisors. Say, is this where you put your money? How much money do you have? My financial advisor, he's got to prove to me some stuff. You know, when somebody comes to pitch me on being a financial advisor, I want to know they're richer than I am. Otherwise, I got no reason to talk to them. I'm already smarter than you. I got more money than you. I need somebody who's smarter than me to help me. And that's where it comes, seeking good counsel. Counsel who's been there, done it, works with people. You have to start. More money than you, that's where you have to start.
And see, I have a book coming out next year. One of the hardest things my family and I ever did was I had to come to terms with what Larry's talking about right there. And I have to actually put a statement in the book that shows a website that is monitored by my certified public account that shows Jim is worth in excess of $10 million. That was a hard thing to do. It's a hard thing to say on here. But my business is my business right up until I'm telling you how to run your business. Then all of a sudden my business becomes your business. And it's just like Larry talked about. They owe you that information. Don't take advice. And the fact they say they have it may or may not be real.
And if they take your information, and they put it into a computer and they give you this big fat packet with all kinds of colored graphs and all kinds of wonderful pie charts, and you get kind of glazed over with data dump, I call it, know that that's not really the kind of advice that you need. You need to understand where you are. You need to understand what your goals are and make sure that advice is from somebody who's given you as advice is from somebody who's competent, who has basically been where you want to go and been successful doing it, and know how you're unique. You need to know that you are unique. You need to make sure your advisor recognizes that your needs, your goals, your plan is unique to you.
Great advice begins with questions. If you sit down with an advisor and he starts telling you about all these products and services, don't walk, run away. But a great advisor will start with a series of questions just like we've been talking about here today. And they need to know where you are, where you want yourself and your family, and the priorities for yourself and your family, and the causes and people you care about. And then and only then can they start to make your money do what you want it to do. But if they don't ask those questions, how in the world could they ever help you get where you want to go if they haven't asked you?
This has just been a stimulating time. Just want to thank each one of you for participating in this. There's so much ground to cover on this subject. If there was one takeaway from what we talked about or something that we missed discussing that you'd like to impart to our listeners, what would that be? And along with that, in doing so, could you please tell our listeners where they can find you and learn more about your services?
Phil, I want to thank you for giving me the wonderful opportunity to visit with Jim and Larry, two of my heroes. So I'm very delighted to have been part of this call. But I think when you're listening to this and you hear all of our advice, understand we've made mistakes along the way. We've seen a lot of people that made right decisions and bad decisions. And at the end of the day, we talk about money, we talk about time, we talk about rich, we talk about wealth. At the end of the day, it's how you feel about yourself, happy with where your life is today. If you have goals that you want to achieve something different, it's up to you. The person in that mirror is the one that's in control of your life. You are the CEO of your life. You are in the driver's seat of you, and your family's life. And it's up to you to make different decisions. If when you look in the mirror you're not happy with how you're spending your time, if you're not happy with how you're spending your money, if you're not happy with how much money you're making, all of those things can change based on the person that you're looking at in that mirror. And that's where it comes from. And that's where the desire comes from. And that desire will create the motivation to get to where you want to be. And you can find me, SharonLechter.com. And I would love to hear from anyone that's been listening to this, because it's all about us helping each other.
Thank you, Sharon. Larry?
I'm going to recap something I said about get 3 sheets of paper. If you can't do anything as a result of this call but get 3 sheets of paper, you're going to be better off. Figure out where you are, figure out where you want to be, and then figure out what you're going to give up to get from where you are to where you want to be. It's about knowing your priorities and knowing that you're going to be willing to do what it takes. In your mindset, I'm going to be willing to do what it takes. If you can't do anything but that, you will be better off simply because you've assessed where you are, you've established some goals, and you realistically, maybe for the very first time, realize that you have to set priorities and be willing to say no to some things so you can say the yes to the life that you really want. If people want to follow me or find me, I'm easy. You can look me up on the internet at Larry Winget, Winget, LarryWinget.com. You can follow me on Facebook, where every day it's a lively discussion. And if they want to ask me questions, I have a YouTube channel, and you can send me a question, and I will answer anything. You can send me a question, and I will answer it on YouTube. So I'm an easy guy to find, always have an opinion.
Fantastic. Thank you, Larry, for being on the program. Jim, why don't you take us home?
Well, it's always great to visit with anybody, anywhere, at any time about Napoleon Hill, and certainly no one more thoughtful than Sharon or more irritating than Larry. So it's great to be with you guys.
You think that bothers me, it doesn't.
And both of these professionals, I want to tell you, Sharon and Larry are available anytime. You can call on them, because I have done it myself. So it is a privilege to just be in their company and get to visit with you and do something today. Take Hill's words and do something, Napoleon Hill's words, and do something today. Because if you don't do something, you're going to end up where you are or worse. And you can start to make choices, take control, make your money work for you, and spend your time wisely. Invest it wisely. You'll never get today back again. And at the end of the day, whatever you got better be worth it, because you spent one day of your life to get it, and you'll never get it back. And if you want to communicate with me, Jim Stovall, Stovall, JimStovall.com.
Fantastic. Well, thank you all for being on this program, Lesson 16 on Budgeting, Time, and Money. It's been a tremendous session of treat and a tremendous session of wisdom and insight. God bless you all.